Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Councillors' Cabinet. It's being webcast. Now, before I start the proceedings, can I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters? There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the fire and emergency procedures and leave via the nearest fire exit. Please can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it is switched off when you are not using it, and also that your mobile devices are turned to silent, which I'm going to do myself because, well, it's the right thing to do. So let us then move to item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies? There appear to be no apologies because we're all here, which is great. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Obviously on the budget, we're not setting the council tax, so you don't have to apologise for that or declare for that, but you wouldn't anyway because you'll have a dispensation when the time comes. Minutes. The last meeting we had was on the 13th of January. Can I sign those minutes as a true and accurate record, please? Is that all right? Thank you. Well, I'll do that then in that case, since you insist. And we now move to item 4, which is questions from the public. And we have one question from the public today, which is from Gillian Oxley.
Mrs. Oxley won't be attending today, so Councillor Coker to respond.
So does that mean that we don't need to read the question out, and Councillor Coker does not need to read the answer to the question out?
So we don't need to read the question out, and we can provide a response to Mrs. Oxley.
We'll do, unless you would prefer to read the answer to the question.
I'm happy, Chair, because I think other people in the community might want to hear the answer as well.
In which case, Councillor Coker, I will read the question, not in the style of Gillian Oxley, my own voice, but then you can give your full answer. So, evidence of appropriate assessment, including local consultation with residents, should be made for each bus shelter location prior to installation. When will Plymouth's new bus shelters be fixed to align with DfT inclusive mobility guidance, ensuring they meet the needs of all residents at each shelter location? So that's for you to answer, Councillor Coker.
Thank you, Chair. The Plymouth Bus Shelter Replacement Programme, which is now substantially complete, has seen the introduction of brand new modern shelters across the whole of Plymouth. The bus shelters are provided by our new bus shelter contractor, Clear Channel UK Limited, who own and maintain the assets at no cost to the council. The new shelters have better lighting, improved seating, and relocated real-time information to make it easier for passengers to view, all in accordance with the guidelines set out within the Department for Transport's Inclusive Mobility Guide, with some shelters also installed with living roofs to make the area greener, healthier and more biodiverse. In addition, 220 of the bus shelters have been added solar panels. Across Plymouth, there are a number of bus shelter configurations, with the type of shelter at each location determined by site-specific factors, such as space available on the footway and the location of underground utilities and services. When installing new shelters, the starting point for the specification was to replicate the old configurations as far as practical. However, Given changes in legislation since the previous contract was awarded in 1999, this has not been possible at every site. This is because space needs to be allowed both within and around each shelter for wheelchair access wherever possible. Again, aligning with the Department for Transport's guidelines. The new shelters need to be bigger to accommodate these accessibility requirements, hence changes have been made to some location. With regard to the bus shelter locations, it was clear through the tendering process for the new contract that Plymouth historically had a large number of bus shelters for its size. At the time of tendering, the new contract, all companies expressing an interest advised the council that Plymouth had too many shelters and that any bid would be based on a reduction in the overall number of shelters for a commercially viable contract to be delivered at no cost to the council. There was, however, a commitment to not remove any bus stops. The decision on which shelters would not be replaced was not taken lightly. The process was data-led and based on the recommendations of a bus shelter advisory group who analysed every single site against a set criteria, including service levels, usage of shelters, and the proximity of other shelters in order to minimise the impact on bus passengers as possible. All guidelines can be found in the Inclusive Mobility, a guide to best practice on access to pedestrian and transport infrastructure on the Department for Transport's website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coker. I'll now move on to item 5, which is Chair's urgent business. I don't have any urgent business, do I, Jamie? Thank you. So I will now, on that basis, move to the main events of today. So first of all, it's great to see Councillor John Stevens here, who's joined us, who's the Chair of the Scrutiny Management Board. Now, John's going to introduce this report, and on backing vocals, Ollie Woodhams is here too, to fill in any gaps, should there be any gaps, and then we will proceed. So first of all, John, you're very welcome, and thank you for attending today.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you everyone for the invitation today. As you know, on the 21st and 22nd of January, the Scrutiny Management Board undertook a detailed examination of the Council's budget proposals for 25-26, focusing on both immediate pressures and long-term sustainability. Our 19 recommendations, which you have seen and responded to, reflect several key priorities: ensuring robust financial management, protecting essential services, and maintaining support for our most vulnerable residents. Like probably all local authorities in the land, we paid particular attention to areas experiencing significant cost pressure, including adult social care and children's services, where we've identified the need for sustainable demand management approaches. The board has focused strongly on risk management and financial administration resilience. Our recommendations regarding working balances and reserve strategy aim to ensure the Council maintains adequate financial buffers while reducing reliance on one-off resources. We're pleased that Cabinet has responded positively to our recommendations, accepting the majority outright. And where recommendations have been partially agreed, we welcome the constructive dialogue about implementation timescales and practical considerations. I'd particularly highlight our recommendations regarding service accessibility, including support for residents who aren't digitally enabled, and the proposed council tax scheme for service personnel. These demonstrate our commitment to ensuring council services remain accessible to all residents. The board will continue to monitor progress on these recommendations through our work programme, either as a scrutiny management board or as one of the 4 scrutiny panels, particularly in areas such as homelessness services, SEND support and the capital programme. We look forward to receiving regular updates on their implementation. And I'd like to thank all members of the board, supporting officers and cabinet members for their commitment and engagement in this process. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed for that, John. Now, we have the recommendations in front of us, but the next item will be a detailed consideration of each of those recommendations by the cabinet, and then following that, there will be a further item, which is inclusion of that in our budgetary proposals, which then we recommend to the full council at our budget meeting. So there's a little bit of a drawn out procedure, but it's really important for us to give proper consideration to the time and effort that your committee put in, and that the officers have spent in preparing that. So what I'm going to do now is essentially to note the recommendations that you have made to us. And if that's something we can do now, and then I will invite Councillor Lowry to respond to each of those recommendations and the cabinet members, relevant cabinet members too, before we have a vote on the final recommendations to be put to the council. So first up then, can I ask you to note the recommendations from the Scrutiny Management Board, please? All those in favour of noting those? Thank you very much. And now I'm going to invite you to stay and watch what we do to your recommendations. First of all, if I could now hand over to Councillor Lowry to take us through the response, please.
Thank you, Chair. Given Councillor Stevens' introduction and your comments, what I'm going to do is actually to dive straight into the recommendations without adding any further context, because I think that's already been perfectly well explained. So, recommendation number 1 is that the Section 151 officer undertakes a comprehensive review of the working balances threshold using SIPFA best practice guidance and comparisons against the Council's statistical neighbours to determine if the 5% remains appropriate given the current risks. And the Cabinet response to that is agreed. Recommendation number 2, subject to the advice of the Section 151 officer, Cabinet prepares a detailed plan to rebuild the reserves within 2 years to provide an adequate buffer against financial risks while implementing a clear strategy to reduce the Council's reliance upon the use of one-off resources and reserves. That is partially agreed, subject to the findings from recommendation number 1 above, and the required timescale might be needed over an additional period of time to cover the medium financial plan rather than just 2 years. Recommendation number 3, that Cabinet updates the comprehensive medium-term financial strategy when the multi-year funding settlements are agreed and submits to scrutiny for consideration before the Council takes a final decision. This is agreed. Recommendation number 4, that all significant capital schemes have a detailed risk assessment of the impact of further interest rate changes on scheme viability before proceeding. This is agreed. Recommendation number 5, that Cabinet consider a council tax discount scheme for service personnel who are deployed more than 6 months in a similar fashion to the single person discount. This is agreed, but will be subject to further consideration of information on the criteria from the board, and any amendments will be an additional financial burden and will be subject to a public consultation. Recommendation 6, that a 6 monthly updates are provided to the relevant scrutiny committee on delivery of planned savings within the homelessness service where the 724k additional funding has been required. This is agreed. Number 7, that planned works to bring together asset management plan is considered at a future meeting of the Scrutiny Management Board, and that an asset register is provided for this purpose. This is agreed. Recommendation number 8, that the council should develop a comprehensive communication strategy to inform residents who are not digitally enabled about the face-to-face services. This information includes service locations, operating hours, and should be distributed through non-digital channels with primary distribution through the annual council tax bill. I would like to invite Councillor Dan to comment on this recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Larry. So this has been partially agreed. We already have different ways of prioritising our support for residents who are not digitally able to access it themselves. For instance, we have a digital assistance line when you ring into the 668,000 number. We have book appointments not only at Central Library but also at Plymouth Stop Library, Plimpton Library and St Budo, and we're looking at expanding that even more. We already work with disability groups, and we've got a digital exclusion team that work with the health and wellbeing hubs, with the community builders, so we already do quite a lot of that work. And the reason we would not put this information out through the council tax bill is because it is not a universal service which everybody can access. And if it wasn't targeted support, we would not have the staff resources to support those who are genuinely digitally excluded. There's a real balance here about building up support for our residents who really need it, and not having people who may abuse the system because it's just a little bit easier than doing it yourself, and there's a real fine balance. So that's why it's been partially agreed. But we totally agree with the sentiments, and we are going to work more closely with the digital exclusion team just to make sure that we have some sort of grid so that we can bring it back to scrutiny, so that people who are not digitally able will be able to have a better idea of where they can go.
Thank you, Councillor Dan. Moving on to recommendation number 9, that Cabinet consider what additional funding may be made available to commemorate Victory in Europe and Victory over Japan Day. That's been agreed subject to any potential financial implications. Recommendation number 10, that clear communication should be in place to ensure that residents are aware that direct cremations are available at the Park Crematorium. Thank you, Sally. Sally, as you know, is an expert on crematoriums and cremations. Number 11, that Cabinet review the effectiveness and sustainability of demand management approaches within the adult social care, given the £12 million of additional costs identified. That is also agreed. Number 12, recommendation that the relevant Cabinet member is recommended to work with DELT Shared Services to ensure that internet connectivity is consistent across the PCC estate, particularly in libraries, to enable residents to gain access to online services. This has been agreed, but I once again would like to invite Councillor Dan if you wish to make any further comment on this recommendation.
I can. So DELT are working closely with the library service to modernise the equipment that's in there. So, for instance, they've already got chip and pin available now in the library, so it is an ongoing process. And I think as we are looking at the different ways that we work and offering perhaps remote services within our libraries, we're definitely going to continue on the upgrading of the technology within our peripatetic places across the city so that people can access it more, especially as we're trying to encourage people to be more digital, because it means that they have much better direct access into the council, and we're going to help facilitate that.
Once again, thank you, Councillor Dan. Recommendation number 13, that the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Committee undertakes a review of the works undertaken in the Dental Task Force. I think that's an excellent idea, and that's been agreed by Cabinet. Recommendation number 14, that the committee welcomes the additional funding to process education, health and care plans, and that a regular update on progress against this backlog is provided to the Children's and Young People and Families Scrutiny Panel. That is agreed. Recommendation number 15, that Cabinet review the funding model for send transport to determine a sustainable long-term solution, including consideration of independent travel training programmes where appropriate. That is agreed. I don't know if Councillor Creswell wishes to comment any further on that recommendation.
Just to say, very much welcomed, and also we are already doing travel training, and basically it's to make sure that we also continue on that work and make sure that we're actually rolling out and getting to as many parents and young people as possible to put forward not just the advantages financially, but also as well the advantages of independence as well. So very much welcome and agreed.
Thank you. Recommendation number 16 is write to the government requesting a review of the criteria in relation to the home to school transport. Such a review should consider whether receipt of mobility vehicles or a higher rate mobility component of disability living allowance or personal independent payments can be included in the local authority's assessment of transport needs. This recommendation has been agreed. Number 17, that Cabinet review the effectiveness and sustainability of demand management approaches within the children's services, given the £19 million of additional costs identified, and further accelerates the use of council assets in the approach to reduce demand on high-cost placements. This has been agreed, and we will, of course, be referring to this specific item in the budget, and, of course, Councillor Lang will give us a further update later on in Cabinet. Recommendation number 18, that Cabinet member for Education, Skills and Apprenticeships establishes a robust monitoring framework to oversee the SEND capital programme, ensuring clear accountability for project milestones and progress. This should form regular reports to the Children and Young Persons and Families Scrutiny Panel. That recommendation has been agreed. And finally, recommendation number 19, that the leader to write to the government to request that notification of the public health grant is received before the 31st of December 2025 to enable adequate planning in the new year's budget. Chair, that is a recommendation for yourself. You may wish to comment.
Indeed, we saw an uplift in the public health grant this year, which I was at a conference this weekend where we were able to thank the ministers responsible for that, because it's part of a general drift now with the government going to be looking much more into needs-based. Plenty of mention was made of the fact that the previous government and previous Prime Minister, if you remember, boasted about taking money away from deprived areas and giving it to more affluent areas, like the ones he represented. I'm glad to say that that nightmare is now over, and we will be seeing changes. But that recommendation, we should hear more about how grant is going to be distributed when the comprehensive spending review is reported in the next month or two.
Thank you, Chair. I think what you can see from me reading those recommendations out, which is incredibly useful, is the level of detail that Scrutiny Management Board went into in reviewing this year's budget. We all know budgets are financially challenging, so I'm very appreciative of their time and efforts in producing these recommendations, and I think they will go a long way to helping us deliver this budget for the following financial year. So I thank them for all their commitment and hard work, and we look forward to working with you in the year ahead to make sure these recommendations are implemented and we continue to strengthen the Council's financial position. So thank you.
Okay, so you've heard the recommendations. You've heard suggested responses to those recommendations. I think what I'll do now, if you don't mind, is put them all on block, and we'll have one vote on agreeing the recommendations and the cabinet response as outlined. Would that be acceptable? Might be easy to minute that, Jeremy, I think. And if we could add our thanks to the to the scrutiny team as well. Our officers did a really good job in preparing the members of the scrutiny panel for the 2 days of hard work. And obviously, I think it'd be useful if any feedback that members of the scrutiny panel have for future exercises like that, we'd be willing to entertain those. Here, we look forward to hearing from you. So, shall I put those recommendations and our response on block to you then? All those in favour, please show. Excellent. Thank you, John. You're free to go. I'm free to stay.
Okay, I will go, Sarah, but nothing personal. But can I add my thanks as well for your consideration of those recommendations and the proactive responses where things are partial, to maximise how we support residents in the city. So thank you to you, Cabinet and officers. Thank you.
Great stuff. Okay, so having looked at the scrutiny of the budget proposals and our response to the scrutiny recommendations, it is now time once again to propose a revenue and capital budget for the forthcoming municipal year. I'm going to do a little bit of floweriness, and then Mark, thankfully, will give us the hard stuff. Support it. Oh, Helen, thank you. Helen will also save us both when we come to do the run through. I mean, the thing is, it's the first budget in 14 years when we have had a government that's not only listening to local government, but is anxious for local government to be more powerful and more able to respond to the aspirations of local communities. It's the first time in 14 years that this council has seen an uplift in financial support that we have received from the government in terms of revenue support grant, partly through the recovery grant, but there are other elements of it which are significant as well. But it's really important that the public understand that local government has been denuded of resources for a number of years, been hollowed out in a number of cases, and the energy, skill and dedication of council officers as well as council members has been in the pursuance of keeping going. What we're looking forward to, looking ahead to the comprehensive review that's currently happening, is a recognition of the pivotal role that local government plays in the delivery of public services right across the board, not just in the things that most people think we do, which is collect the bins and fill potholes in, but all the other elements to our work across 300 services. In terms of work with health service, for example, on prevention, on the care of vulnerable children, on the well-being of vulnerable adults, all of these things beyond, underneath the radar, go on excellently every day. And certainly a conference that Jemima and I and Sally attended over the weekend, clear signals coming from the government that the role of local government is understood, the need for repair to the local finances is understood, but also that the demands that will be put on local government going forward are not going to be let up. In fact, we may get new burdens. as well as those new burdens, we may get new structures. We know that local government reorganisation is in the pipeline. We know that devolution is very much on the cards. And so the work of the council, in addition to simply delivering services, will also place additional time demands on the chief executive, senior staff, and senior members. But the thing to say about this budget is that we have a balanced budget to present today. It's a major achievement. We, as you know, unlike a number of other authorities, have not been asking for extra money from the government in the form of exceptional financial support. We have asked for exceptional financial support, but not for money. As far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to say that the City Council is challenged financially, as every local authority is. But our finances and the budget we're putting forward today means that we are in a strong and balanced position. This budget, as far as I'm concerned, is reinforcing Plymouth's preeminence in the region in terms of what we deliver, in the terms of support we give to other partners in the private sector, and of course the public private sector as well as the public sector. In terms of the private sector, remember always that economic development is not a statutory function, but it's a function that we exercise very importantly, because we're in a part of the world where we need to make growth happen. We're not managing the consequences of growth like they are in other parts of some other parts of the country. So that means that our work in this budget, for instance, is to support the creation of 8,000 jobs. I mean, that's incredibly ambitious of itself. But it's also, as I say, in the less visible but equally important work of protection of children and protection for adults, which is why this budget contains significant rises in funding towards adult social care and children's social care. And that's quite right, but do not think that that's easy. It's at the expense of growth in other areas. And in this budget, as well as uplift, there is a degree of reduction in certain services in order to make that happen. But let's look at what we'll be doing and what we have done. I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to keep banging on about it because not everybody does it. The Freeport investment is significant, getting £25 million out the door, and in terms of what that's going to deliver coming down the track. The innovation barns down at Ocean's Gate. I mean, you'll remember we started Ocean's Gate some time ago by, digging chunks out of a surface level car park in the South Yard. And now we're in a situation where there's a significant cluster of innovation in that part of Devonport, and it's driving change. There's significant investment underway in the National Marine Park. Sue and I have the pleasure of sitting on the Marine Park board and seeing things like the project at Tinside coming through, seeing the work down at in Plymouth coming to fruition, which is at long last, the remaking of that peninsula is going to be really significant in terms of the delivery of sailing and other facilities there. The Brickfields regeneration, incredible investment by Argyle, made possible by our officers' work and Sue's work too. we'll be launching the first port strategy that we've ever had very soon. And of course, I keep mentioning this to local authority colleagues up and down the country. Homes England think we're worthy of significant investment to drive real house building in the city again. So all good, all exciting stuff. And a lot of this stuff is happening because of choices that we make. You know, making a budget is really difficult. And what it is ultimately about, although we have certain constraints placed on us by government about what we have to do, it is a political environment that we're operating in, and it's the language of priorities. And it's particularly important when resources are tight for you to make good political choices. But it's also important when times are easier for you to have those guiding principles too. So we'll be doing some significant stuff, and we'll continue to ask the government for more resources as time goes on, because we have ambition for our city. We are a significant player in the sub-region, yes, but we're also a very, very significant deliverer of growth for the country, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So I'm going to ask Mark, if he wouldn't mind, taking us through this balanced budget. But before he does so, I want to thank the officers of the council. I do want to thank David as well. I know we keep thanking David for delaying his retirement, but yeah, he hasn't finally gone on holiday. Well, it's kind of all right to do that now because we're at that stage. Yeah, no, it's the torch, isn't it? Because we've been there. But you know, it's really, you know, what he has done in delaying his retirement and working and helping us to work this through. I cannot thank him enough for that. I think it's been a great act of public service. But I've got to thank Mark too for his hard work on this. We're very lucky to have somebody who's so knowledgeable about finance and so questioning and innovative and envelope stretching as you. And I really am very grateful to you, Mark. So I'm going to hand the stage over to you now, if you wouldn't mind, and take us through all of this.
Thank you for your kind comments, but I will remind you that in respect of David, he said you do owe him a bouquet of flowers for his wife, so you've got to part with that with some. You've done that job. Well done. As you said, though, we have got a balanced budget here, which that sounds all very boring, but actually not many councils, or not all councils in the country, are able to do this because, like us, they've got many financial challenges. But it's through the hard work and difficult decisions we've made over the years, and we'll have to make many more going forward, that have enabled us to do this, despite the difficultness around the finances. So we do have a balanced budget, but I will be making an amendment later on in respect to the budget itself. And this isn't the end of the process, sadly. It does have to go to full council on the 24th of February, in which we will not only consider this budget further, as every councillor gets the opportunity to do so, but also we will be setting the council tax on that occasion as well. And you've probably heard me over and over and over saying adults, children, SEND, and homelessness. And of course, nothing's changed. That is exactly the case. Those elements of this council's budget and its finances are being predominantly spent on the provision of adult social care, provision of children social care, providing support to people in homelessness, and children with special educational needs. Last year's budget, in excess of 75% of our expenditure was being spent on the provision of these services. This year, subject to our final sign-off, we could be in the region of 83% of our budget is being spent on those areas. It's appropriate that we do so, of course, because those areas need our support. very important aspect. But at some stage, alongside with local government, central government is going to have to find a mechanism of funding those challenging aspects. But in respect of that, we've made the following additions within this budget. There's an additional £12 million allocated for adult social care. For homelessness and emergency bed and breakfast, there's an allocation of additional funding of 724,000 K. Children's social care and home to school transport has been allocated an additional £19 million, taking next year's budget to £92 million for the provision of that service. If you go to, sorry, I was on it earlier on, Tudor spoke earlier on, page 23 of the budget papers refers to the specific allocation of grants, and it shows the differential between last year's financial provision and this year's financial provision from central government. And you will see there that last year we were allocated some £78 million from the Conservative government. This year we've been allocated in excess of some £91 million from the Labour government, an increase of £13.3 million. If we didn't get that £13 million, we'd be struggling, really, really struggling. We'd have to make some serious cuts to this local authority. So I'm delighted to see that the new Labour government is listening. And if you refer to that page 23, section 2.5, you will see there's a recovery grant allocation in there of some £6.6 million. That alone is basically saving our bacon and keeping us going. So you're right, they're listening to us, they're doing the right things in respect of providing funding to those local authorities that most need it. I'm sure all local authorities would scream and say we all need more, but the reality is places like Plymouth, where there is a considerable amount of deprivation, do need more support than perhaps some of the more affluent areas across the country. So I'm delighted that we've had this extra money, which is allowing us to make that provision that I previously referred to, of course. So Appendix 3 sets out the additional cost pressures and the adjustments required, which are totaling over £50 million, and these are offset by those grants that I've just referred to. But overall, this is a very positive budget. It's not about cutting services, it's about continuing the services we have, and where at all possible, building upon them, and that will come out further in our discussions. So, just to let people know, we are not closing libraries. We have increased the allocation of net zero budgets to reinforce our commitment. As we have said, additional money has been allocated for demand-led services. We can confirm additional commitment to Plymouth Active Leisure with an increased funding. And I'm going to invite Councillor Dan to comment in respect of this because she's lobbied very hard in respect of this element. So it's appropriate that she should give us some information in respect as to why we've made this allocation.
I'm always going on about sport in the city, and actually it's a really good day to be talking about sport in the city, isn't it? As Meetings Town was lit up nice and green yesterday with the wonderful Green Army were chanting, and Plymouth Argyle beat Liverpool. Just thought I'd get in because nobody else has mentioned that today, so a bit opportunistic. But it's about investment. So during the course of the year, you'll look in the capital programme as well, and there's also continuing investment in Brickfield, so at Fulston Park. But we also have to support our own assets. And Plymouth Active Leisure have done a great job of really, really increasing the amount of people who use the Life Centre. And it is one of our, shining stars. So this year we've helped support them invest nearly £500,000 in their new gym equipment. And you think, well, why is that important? And what impact does it have? Already it's driven up their membership by 6%. They've got an amazing new e-gym, which some people in this room who will remain nameless, but I'm looking at you, have already joined and used. And when we talk about earlier today and about public health, it means that we can help support more people to be active in a way that suits them by having such high-tech equipment. I mean, for somebody who's never been in a gym, it's really, really important. But also coming back to Brickfields and Fulston Park, I think it shows how much we are willing to invest in collaboration across the city. I mean, the Fulston Hub is opening on March the 14th. It's going to have an open weekend on the 15th and the 16th, and then it's open to the public. But that is going to be a state-of-the-art health and wellbeing hub, which is going to be right next to aspirational academy football, rugby, athletics. It's brought in money for hockey and petanque. So when we spend our money, the benefit we get from it is amazing. And now I know we've got extra money from public health as well, of course. We'll be banging over there to see how we can spend that money, because the more we spend on keeping people fit and healthy when they're able, the less the costs on social care and the health service later on. So it just sort of links all the investment together. That probably was a bit longer than you expected, but
Kind of explains why she's forcing us all to join the gym. You see, I think she's trying to get that 6% even higher. You've referred to the capital programme, Chair, and as you say, it's an incredibly ambitious one, and we'll be discussing it in detail at the full council and later on in this meeting. So I don't propose to go into any further detail now. And at the beginning of my introduction, I did make some reference to the fact that I would be proposing an amendment, and you will recall that we have received a petition for a referendum on a directly elected mayor for Plymouth. And these budget papers do not reflect any financial provision for the cost of undertaking the referendum. The risk register states as a red bracket significant risk, the financial implications arising from the call for a referendum on a elected local mayor for Plymouth and any resultant election without the mitigation being contingency funded will have to be identified. So basically, we haven't identified previously any allocation of money for this. The cost in 25-26 of holding a referendum would be some £410,000, and the only contingency funds available are the working balances. And whilst the council's proper officer has yet to validate the petition received at this point, it is likely that we will need to budget for this cost. We have been criticised by our external auditors for the level of reserves, and we have worked hard to increase the balances over the last few years. This referendum will immediately impact those reserves and make a further dent in them, which we'll have to find some mechanism of rectifying. So I'm sure at some stage you might wish to comment. You have commented in the past about this proposal, but nevertheless, subject to the proper council officer, which is a new terminology on me, which I've learned today is in fact Chief Executive, so Tracy Lee. So subject to Tracy and the team undertaking their full validation of that petition, but in the likelihood that does happen, I would like to make the following recommendation. That Cabinet recommends a revenue budget for 2025 to 2026 in the sum of £253,008 million to full council, subject to a further drawdown in the sums of some £410,000 from the working balances in 25-26 to cover the cost of the referendum for a directly elected mayor resulting from the receipt of a petition to that effect. Should the proper officer agree, a valid petition has been received. So that is my recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, we have to do that because the money for the referendum has to come from somewhere. And it could come from more services. We could chop the money that we were going to allocate to Tom for grass cutting, because at £300,000 this year and probably an equivalent sum the following year, that referendum cost would wipe out that extra money for grass cutting for 18 months. Or the money could be taken from the money we give to the Theatre Royal. And the proposer of this referendum, by the way, his partner is the chair of the Theatre Royal. The grant for the Theatre Royal would be wiped out if we decided to take the money for the referendum from that. I don't suppose we'll be doing that, will we? But what people need to understand is that this might be fun for the exercise. It might be interesting to have the debate, but what is happening here is a real-time call on public money. There is no more money to be had to run this referendum. That has to come from taxpayers' money. There is no money if we do get a referendum in favour of a directly elected mayor. There's no extra money coming from the government to pay the salary of the mayor or their office, which, by the way, would be in addition to the existing cost of running the council. So, by the way, and this is something the public need to understand, that if this referendum goes the way that the millionaire sponsor of this referendum wants it to go, we'll have to come back and take more money out of services in order to pay for that mayoralty and for their expensive layer of extra managers. It does not reduce the number of councillors. It does not reduce the need for a cabinet. It does not reduce the need to have the council agree the budget. All of these things stay in place. The fantasy that this is equivalent to an Andy Burnham style mayor is rubbish. Completely false, utterly false. The mayor that is being proposed is instead of a leader of the council. An Andy Burnham style mayor, like they have in Manchester, is in addition to all the leaders of all the councils in Greater Manchester. And that does bring in more money, that does bring in more power, which is why I have been off asking if we can work on a wider footprint. So I'm not a downer on mayors per se, but I'm very much a downer on us, on this bizarre exercise, because it actually penalises Plymouth, not enhances Plymouth, and that needs to be understood. So the only way to get this money to hold this referendum without cutting services this year is to take the money out of balances, which we've already been told through the scrutiny process we could do with more of, not less. So this actually makes it harder. And our auditors will be coming and having a look at this. You can mark my words, but this is the least painful way in which we can cover the cost of this exercise. So that's all I'll say about that in seconding Councillor Lowry's proposal for that amendment. Okay, so I would now like to open it up if anybody fancies anything to say or any questions to our officers at this point. Yeah, you need to come in because forgive me, you've got there's something we've got to do about the Tamer Bridge estimates, have we not?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'd also like to propose an amendment to follow our colleagues in Cornwall. After we've debated and agreed, hopefully agreed, item 9, the Tamar Bridge and Tall Point Ferry 25-26 revenue budget and capital budget, that we actually include it in our own proposed capital and revenue budget, which actually makes the situation much clearer. And I think as we talk through the next item, it's a course of action that I've agreed after Cornwall had done it, that we would follow suit.
It's a slightly awkward thing because it's a joint committee. So it's Plymouth City Council and Cornwall Council that actually run the bridge, right, through this committee. And again, part of our issue as well is that we might decide to do something on tolls, but we have to ask the government. A minister has to spend time on the tolls for the Tamer Bridge, would you believe, right? One of those things that perhaps if we had devolution, we could just get on with ourselves, but we are not, at this point anyway, not worthy of making this decision. So in order to harmonise the timeline with what's happening in Cornwall, we need to do that. I hope that's clear to everybody around the officer table. Yes, great. Yeah, please, Mark, and then make that part of your thing, okay? All right? We'll work it out, we'll work out who's seconded and who's proposed, but I think we've got it on the table. Everybody understand that? Yeah, when we've got to the end, we'll do that. So Helen, since you're here, is there anything you'd like to add to our invective?
Yeah, just on behalf of the Section 151 officer, to reiterate some of the things you've already said, it's a strong position to be able to bring a balanced budget without any financial support from MHCLG. It's hard work to make the budget, but the hard work starts now, not on the 1st of April, to achieve the savings and the transformative efficiencies that the budget relies on. There's been some significant budget allocations this year to areas that we all know about. We've got pressures in children's social care, homeschool transport, but that level of investment is not sustainable long term. So the transformation projects need to be looking at how to make it more sustainable. And finally, we will be reflecting any amendments agreed in the final version of the report. Thank you.
That's great, thank you very much. Anything anybody else wants to add at this point? Okay, no, nothing from you?
Just a few words.
Yeah.
I think, as Helen says, this has been a budget that feels like it's been a long time in the making, as they all do. And I think we've got to a position that is a positive position. But as Helen says, there's a lot of work to do. You'll note from the report that the medium-term financial plan will accompany the report to full council. And with the help of Jens Gemmel, we are working on more detail around the transformation programme, and that will come back to you as a cabinet in March.
Okie dokie. Right, well, strange that this may seem, this is neither the end nor the beginning of the process. It's a continuous process. Feels sometimes that we work in a branch of Yo Sushi with a little turntable that's going round and round and round and round and round continuously. That's how it actually feels sometimes. It never ended. But I think there is one end in sight, which is this annuality. Now, I know we make a budget every year and we have to, but actually in terms of a medium-term financial plan, it would be nice to have a medium-term financial horizon presented to us by the government, which is for the first time in many, many years we will have the opportunity to do. And that means that we can make some decisions this year for 2 years down the line in the certainty of what will be happening in 2 years down the line. It won't be perfect, it never is, but the intent of the government is to restore medium-term financial planning as the day job in local government, not as an aspiration. And that I say, and so say all of us. Right, so I'm going to ask Jamie now to go through the amendments, just to make sure we know what the amendments are that we are voting upon, to go along with the substantive recommendations that we've already talked about. Jamie.
Through you, Chair. So the first amendment that we received was that Cabinet recommends the revenue budget 25-26 is the sum of 2.53.08 million to full council, subject to a further drawdown in the sum of 410,000 from the working balance in 25-26 to cover the cost of the referendum for a directly elected mayor, resulting from the receipt of a petition to that effect, should the proper officer agree that the valid petition has been received. So that was the first recommendation. And then suggested wording would be subject to Cabinet agreeing the Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry item as item 9 on this agenda, that the Tamar Bridge Tor Point Ferry Joint Committee Revenue Budget and Capital Programme and 25-26 draft business plan is included in the final budget report for Council's approval.
Terrific, that's fabulous. Thank you, Jamie, that's really helpful. So, just to say in closing, Mark, did you want to add anything in closing before I go to the vote? Okay, so just to be absolutely clear, as well as the Tamar Bridge stuff, we're proposing taking 410 grand of hard-earned savings out. So I don't know how much the man proposing the project is paid out, but it's cost you, the taxpayer, £410,000 today for his vanity project, just so you know. Okay, so I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Thank you all, and thank you, Helen, and the team as well for all your hard work. Right, well, that appears to be that. We have now got to go and talk about the Tamar Bridge and Torpike Ferry stuff, but given what we've been saying, we've read the papers. Mark, is there anything you want to add to that item, before we go and vote on it?
The only couple of things, Chair, that I'd like to re-emphasise, as you say, we've got a comprehensive budget report in front of us. But I think the real interesting thing with this budget is it still gives the joint chairman of the Torpoint Tamar Bridge and portfolio holders of both authorities are continuing to lobby government, have the ability to apply RPI to the bridge tolls, which requires primary legislation and is currently being progressed with the support of our local MPs. It seeks a long-term package of financial support for the Tamar Bridge, although this requirement has been unsuccessful up to this point, but there has been a real music change in government, and they are now listening to us. And I think it's worth pointing out the introduction of our Tamar 2050 in February 24 to provide a more robust agenda for the future aspirations regarding the crossing may provide more traction regarding government support in the future. And also that the Torpoint and Tamar Bridge Joint Ferry Committee resolutions can be found in more detail in your report of the 6th of December 2024. I think we've moved a long way on this agenda. It's taken us a number of years, but we're in a much stronger position, and I recommend that Cabinet accept the report.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mark. It's, as I say, it's the most bizarre way in which we have to go about this, particularly when you think about it. It's part of the national road network, isn't it? It is actually technically a bridge, but it's also A38. So, it is a very strange. Anyway, you're right, we're making progress. Can we put the recommendations to the committee, please, to the Cabinet? All those in favour? Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And the local MPs that we're working with are on both sides of the Tamar, are they?
Yes, Chair. South East Cornwall, Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport, and Plymouth Moorview.
Marvellous. That's where we like it. That's excellent news. Okay, so if I could now move to item 10, which is more money discussions. Finance monitoring report up to December 2024. Mark, over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be brief because the context of this report is pretty much the same message I gave in the budget for the next financial year, in that whilst we're seeing a forecast variance of some £1.842 million against the budget for month 9, this is a reasonably acceptable figure for us to be giving ourselves some assurance at the end of the financial year we will be able to balance our books. So I can just give you some confidence that that will be the case. You will see from section B, table 2 of the forecast revenue by directorate, It's, as I've said previously, adults, children, homelessness, the provision of SEND is areas in which the council is seeing a significant increase in demand, which is resulting in financial pressure. And note the next paper is Councillor Lang's paper, and she'll be explaining some of the actions herself and her team are taking in respect of dealing with some of those issues. And I note the comments by Helen and the Chief Executive in relation to transformational change, those being critically important in the next financial year to dealing with and addressing some of those long-term pressures that exist in those areas. The report's there for your consideration. It sets out in detail each of those pressures. They're the ones that I've been talking about and you've been experiencing all year long, so I don't propose to go into them in any further detail. Just finally, this report also includes our capital programme, and you will see there is a increase in period of some £24 million, and that figure has been incorporated into the previous budget documentation, so that will be approved at full council anyway. So there's no need to approve this paper at full council because that's wrapped into the budget that we just previously agreed and will be subject to full council. And the provision of each of those fundings and their grant allocations and each of the projects is set out on page 167 of this report. I don't think I've got any further to say really. So good progress. Well done to everybody involved. You know, it's a team effort as always, of course, and we have some 3 months to go, and I have a high degree of confidence in working with officers that we will be in a position where we can balance our books at the end of this financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed. Any observations, comments from members? No? Okay, well, in which case, can we, the recommendation, which is basically noting. All those in favour of noting? Thank you, it's agreed. Lovely, thank you. Now, our regular children's service update. Jemima, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. As I've said many times before, this has been a really challenging year for the council spend on placements for our children in care. National pressures have impacted, leading to a significant increase in the cost of care for children. As a result of a shortage of foster carers nationally, more children are having to be placed in very high-cost residential children's homes, and a small number of children, 2 currently in Plymouth, are experiencing very high-cost unregulated placements. Many of our children in care are experiencing stable family placements with our foster carers in Plymouth at lower cost. However, to be able to reduce spend significantly, we need to reduce the number of children experiencing residential care by urgently recruiting more foster carers and supporting them to be able to meet the needs of all of our children. The Family Homes for Plymouth Children is a comprehensive programme of work to ensure our children in care have access to a home that meets their needs from when they first come into our care. Foster for Plymouth is recruiting more foster carers, including by being part of the South West Hub, and is supporting carers better, including through our first Mockingbird model this year with 3 more planned. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Mockingbird. So we had a foster carer summit at Dartmoor Zoo, and a huge thank you to Dartmoor Zoo for hosting us on Friday morning for no cost. And we had our hub foster carer, Jo. She and her partner Duncan are lead that constellation, as they're called. And listening to her talk about the Mockingbird Hub was her passion and her commitment and her determination. It was just so inspiring. And the way it works is it's like it's the embodiment of that. It takes a village to raise a child. There are 10 families in this constellation, 18 children living in that constellation. We've had no placement breakdowns in the Mockingbird. It's a really nurturing, supportive environment. We've got another constellation coming online later this year, and then 2 more. The plan is to have 4 at least. And they are a really significant initiative in what we're doing in children's services. So I referred to the summit which was held with carers last Friday, and what was really encouraging about that was that none of the things that foster carers talked to us about last year were what they talked to us about this year, because we had listened to them last year and really changed our offer and shaped it in light of what they told us at that summit. And so it was really, really a positive morning. And again, you know, a huge thank you to Dartmoor Zoo, who let us be there all morning and are very, very supportive of Foster for Plymouth. We're starting to see some progress with our programme of work to support our children to move from residential care to families, but our ambitions are impacted by the national shortage of fostering placements. We're also making good progress improving support to kinship and special guardianship carers so that more children can remain within their own family networks, and that is a big priority in the Children's Wellbeing Bill as well. Our first children's home is on track to open later this year so that we can stop placing so many children in very high cost care a long way from Plymouth, and further homes will follow. A clear plan is in place to ensure that when it is safe for them to do so, children are supported to return from care back to their families. This is a comprehensive programme of work where we are starting to see progress in areas that will lead to significantly improved outcomes for our children and young people and reduced costs to the council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Jemima. Okay, can I ask if you note the verbal report from Jemima? Thank you very much. Thank you all. We now move on to local government reorganisation and devolution update. A week is a long time in politics. A month in devolution and LGR land is an eternity, let me tell you. We've had a considerable number of meetings, the Chief Executive and I think we have now officially lost count.
We wouldn't even count.
No.
We waste too much time.
Too much time. I just need to update you because, as you know, the English devolution white paper is out and about, and as right across England, apart from London, has set many a tongue a-wagging. Basically, the thing sets out the vision for strategic authorities. So, with Andy Burnham-style mayors to be the norm across England for strategic purposes. So, things like transport, economic development, environmental stuff. I mean, there's a whole host of it. And what that requires is basically top-tier authorities in particular to come together in combined authorities. And just to reiterate, combined authorities are not merged authorities. They are authorities that stay as they are, but they collaborate in an environment for the dispersal of money and power to their constituent authorities. So that's important to say. The government will require these combined authorities, these strategic combined authorities, to have mayors, directly elected mayors, by all the people in that area casting a vote. So, happily for us, the English devolution white paper also included reorganisation of local government. Now, since 1974, we've had a system of government in this country with county councils, who are, to all intents and purposes, transport authorities, children's social services and adult social services authorities, plus a few other bits and bobs. Underneath them, and they're referred to as top-tier authorities. Underneath them are a system of district councils who deliver the remaining services. So whilst counties are responsible for disposing of waste, district councils are responsible for collecting it. And then there's the unitary authorities like Plymouth, which have all functions, both district and county functions under their purview. Now, the government simply would now like all councils to be unitary. What that means is boundary changes, to have those unitaries be of a sufficient size so that they are financially stable and viable going forward, and sustainable is the word that they use. That's going on at the moment. We received a letter from Jim McMahon, the local government minister, inviting all local authorities in our area to propose new unitary authorities in Devon. In Cornwall, of course, they already are a unitary authority, so they won't require that. I'm not familiar with what's happening in the Isles of Scilly, but I would imagine they've probably had a similar letter. And then there are a number of areas in the country to which this applies, and a number of areas to which this doesn't apply because they're already unitarised. Now, we know because of our size, 267,000 or around that, that we will probably need to increase our size in order to get government approval to continue as a unitary authority, or depending on how it goes, to become a new unitary authority with Plymouth within it. But as I say, the key principles for this are sustainable, high quality services, whilst at the same time preserving local identity. So there's a hint there that massive, amorphous unitary authorities aren't likely to find favour with the government either. The place shaping agenda and the place making agenda, driving growth and good, highly valued local services is kind of where we are. So we're committed to ensuring that any changes enhance, not diminish, local service delivery. We want to make sure that we maintain strong connection with our communities and create a structure that is, as I say, both financially sustainable and operationally efficient. These principles reflect our dedication to protecting what makes our area special, whilst at the same time building a stronger, firmer foundation for the future. Now, we have got to work fast. We're working under very tight deadlines. In fact, we have to prepare our first cut of what we think it will be for Plymouth by the 21st of March. That's 21st of March 2025, so not many days left to do that. So we've got a crack officer team. Is that what we say? That's how we describe it. Crack officer team. I mean, obviously, you know, we've got to keep talking to people. We've got to talk to our partners. We've got to talk to residents. We've got to talk to our staff. Trying to make sure that we hear what they're saying to us and as best we can to incorporate what they're saying in our proposition. We've a number of exam questions to answer in this, you know, but we don't have a lot of time to do it, so we've got to crack on. We'll have more details of that, and that'll probably have to come out before we next meet as a cabinet as well. You'll probably hear it outside of this room before you hear it inside of this room, I would suggest. And of course, there are a number of people in this conversation because in our case, you know, we have 8 district councils as next door neighbours in Devon. We have a county council that obviously is looking at this. And our colleagues in Torbay, of course, are already a unitary authority themselves. And we've heard through media channels that our friends in Exeter are also keen to jump on this unitary train. So you know, it's all kicking off, as they say. I just want to go briefly back to the question of strategic authority. You'll know that some time ago there was a proposition that we join forces with Devon and Torbay in what was then called under the previous government a level 2 deal, and we decided not to join with that. I think a good, wise decision, actually, because although the orders for that are going through Parliament at the moment, they're almost on the way out before they've been on the way in. And it's been made very clear to us that if we want more money and more authority to spend on our local citizens and on services, then getting on the strategic authority train is what we need to do. So we're going to continue to be talking to our neighbours. You'll know that Cornwall Council recently denied our overtures, but I'm still of the view that South West Peninsula unitary strategic mayoral authority is the best thing for us. But we recognise that Cornwall have made their decision for the moment. But we've now got to progress something that helps our part of the world. And so we'll be continuing to talk to Devon and to Torbay about a strategic combined authority for us. We're going to have to do that. But more of that when we have it. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the situation. And that is a very small summary of a lot of talking and a lot of listening. And there's more talking and more listening to do. Thank you, Tracy, by the way, because for chief execs, as well as continuing to run their authorities, they're also having to think about this quite a lot. And, you know, it's a lot of stuff to carry home in your head at the end of the working day. So thank you for what you're doing. I know you're doing a lot of peacemaking and diplomatic work all the time on this. So that's the end of that. If I could now move on to leaders' announcements. Actually, I've only got one really, and I think Sudan has kind of already preempted that, so I won't. Well, I don't know whether you know, but I don't know whether you've heard, but Plymouth Argyle, who are, as you know, the world's greatest football team, and that the world has ever seen, beat the so-called best team in the world and best team in Europe and best team in the English Premier League yesterday. Jemima and I was explaining to the BBC that, because they asked, you know, were we watching? And I said, well, Jemima and I were listening to the Deputy Prime Minister at the time the match was on, and we let out a little noise when the goal went in. So it was a bit, you know, why were we cheering in when you hadn't finished the speech, sort of thing. And there were a number of Liverpool supporters in the room with us, weren't they? And they were not best pleased. But look, I'm going to write a letter to Simon Hallett, who's had a little bit of criticism lately and deserves a bit of a pat on the back, I think, for that, and Andrew Parkinson too, for the genius decision to bring in the new manager. Because it's quite clear that a transformation is underway at Home Park. There's no doubt about that. Irrespective of yesterday's results, the team has changed, and now there's a steel there, and a steely determination to secure not just all the way to Wembley, but actually survival in the Championship, which I guess for most Argyle fans they'd swap anything for that. And I think, you know, we wish them well for the fifth round and the fifth round draw tonight, but also for the rest of the season. The club is as big a part of the city as any institution we have, and what they achieved for our reputation as a city yesterday was immeasurable. So we thank all the players and all the team at home park and outside of home park for what they've done. And the fans who were just epic yesterday. So we're very proud, aren't we? Very proud. So the other thing was, while I was away, as usual, this happened. I think this happened last time I went away for a week working. Something terrible happened. I just want to kind of get Jemima to talk about the Mount Edgecombe thing, and perhaps Tom, if you wanted to add something as well, because I know that you two took a lot on there, and perhaps I could ask you to bring us all up to speed.
Yeah, so you're talking about the major fire that happened at the Barrow Centre at Mount Edgecombe on Tuesday evening. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but 2 staff lost their homes and 2 holiday lets were destroyed in the blaze. And at one time, over 40 firefighters were in attendance and numerous appliances from all over Cornwall. The fire that started in a member of staff's residence sadly moved through the roof space of the adjacent properties, but because of the amazing efforts of the fire brigade, was prevented from spreading to the rest of the Barrow Centre. The fires had an obvious impact on the staff who lost their homes and entire belongings, and the businesses that have been forced to close while we carry out essential making safe works. The site has been made safe, and over the coming weeks, consolidation works and power restoration will take place so that we hope to open the cafe and businesses in time for half-term holidays, which is a critical time for the businesses that operate from the park. And the wider park remains open as usual. I think it's important. I know that's been shared a lot, but I think it's important to say that again. I would like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to the sterling efforts of the firefighters, Mount Edgecombe staff and business staff that have all pulled together in response to this, and also officers at Plymouth City Council and Cornwall Council. Their incredible efforts meant the site was secured and made safe within 24 hours of handover from the fire brigade. Counselling has been made available to all staff, and the local Rame community has responded, as it always does in times like this, with just so much kindness and practical help. There is still a long way to go, but this isn't the first time Mount Edgecombe has risen from the flames, and it will do so again. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So, as Jemima's already said, got the pleasure of being one of the co-chairs of the Mount Edgecombe Committee, and I think this really shook that community and the staff there. It was a really devastating fire. Took about 40 firefighters from across Cornwall and Devon to put it out over quite a long period. And as Jemima's already indicated, severely impact residents and businesses, and some lost their possessions as well. Both myself and Councillor Kate Hewitt were there the morning after this tragedy took place. Spoke to some of the residents who've been impacted, and I can't imagine what it would be like to, to be living a very normal day, and then for that to happen in such a short period of time. The community response has been phenomenal. Kate Hewitt has helped to coordinate some of that. Just after I'd arrived, she'd collected pasties that were given freely by a local business. There's been crowdfunders set up by local community groups. There have been clothes donated to people who have lost all of the possessions that they own. And it's been really impressive to see how quickly that's come about. On behalf of the committee, I wanted to thank the officers who've been involved in that. So Chris and his team were working throughout day and night on the response to that, but also the people that have supported them as well. So Victoria, David Draffen and their Cornish counterparts really stepped up in very busy weeks for them amongst their own roles as well. We're going to be very involved in the rebuilding process more generally after that. There's been weekly meetings set up to look at what comes next and how we can continue to support everyone involved. Thank you.
No, that's great. Anybody who doesn't believe we know how to work together when push comes to shove, that was a great effort. And so it will be not just for the emergency, but the recovery as well. So Cornwall is stepping up now, taking a lead on the capital rebuild and all that kind of stuff, which is brilliant. Obviously the insurances issues there around excess, but, we'll have to, swallow that. And what is tragic is the real effort that's been gone in, as well as the individual tragedies of this. you know, the whole Edgecombe thing and the journey that the committee's been on and both councils have been on these last few years to get that facility really singing. Yeah, it's tragic, but I'm confident that with the energy of the staff from both councils, we can make it get it back to what it was and will be again. There's no doubt about it. Once again, I've got to thank the staff for going that extra mile, as they always do. Always do. We're so lucky to have such wonderful staff. And thank you too to the fire services of Devon and Somerset Fire Service and Cornwall Fire Service as well for what they achieved there. Okay, that is that on item 13. We have strayed slightly now into 14, which is cabinet member updates. You've snuck 2 in already. Have you got any more?
Yes, I have.
Go on then.
Thank you. I also want to say a very quick thank you to the box staff who made sure that Smeaton's Tower was lit up green last night to celebrate that incredible historic victory yesterday. And it's just been wonderful to see that image shared thousands and thousands of times of our brilliant city all over the place. So yeah, amazing. And staying on the box, we had a brilliant opening weekend for John Lyon's exhibition Carnivalesque. We had the official opening on Friday night. We had close to 2,000 visitors at the box over this weekend. I think it's an amazing show. I'm not an art critic, so I can't really articulate. It's just, his work is just so engaging and uplifting, and I'm looking forward to going back. There's huge amounts of his work in the galleries, and it's amazing. And on Saturday, we had a day of poetry events at the box, including a conversation between Osman Yousafzadeh, whose work is in St Luke's, and Echo Eshen, chaired by Anthony Clichy from the University of Plymouth. So I think the box, particularly on Saturday, was just absolutely buzzing and alive with so much going on. It was announced last week that Joshua Reynolds' portrait of Mai, which you might know is, I think, one of the most expensive paintings of his ever, it was purchased by the National Gallery last year for £50 million. And so it was been saved for the nation. Sorry, not last year. We're in 25 now. That was in 2023. So it's going on tour next year, and we are one of only 3 places in the country to get it on that National Gallery tour, which is really exciting. And also in 2026, the acclaimed director Steve McQueen's film Grenfell will be coming to the box. And again, we're one of only a few places in the country that this work is touring to, working with the Tate to show McQueen's visceral, seminal work about Grenfell. And once again, this cements the box burgeoning reputation as a place which is nationally known and locally loved. So I'm moving on to a youth service announcement, quite different, but also very exciting. Plans are progressing to launch 2 new locations that we will be offering esports. Now a multi-billion-pound industry, esports allows players or teams to compete in various games up to professional levels. It has evolved from casual gaming to an industry with global tournaments, sponsorships, and a wide variety of employment opportunities. Further, it is going to be one of the newest sports to be included in the Olympics. And Efford and Honicknoll Youth and Community Centres, which you know are currently undergoing significant redevelopment to reinvigorate and reimagine them, this is where these esports facilities are going to be hosted. So with this, we're also excited to announce plans for the inclusion of 20 new gaming stations and a number of F1 approved racing simulators. Our ambition is to provide an inclusive, enjoyable, safe and enhancing service to our young people in our communities. So that is really exciting. It's something the youth service is very, very excited about. I'm rubbish at video games, but once it's all installed, I quite like the idea of the F1 simulator. Oh, that's all my announcements, because I talked about the Fostering Summit. So yes, that's all from me, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jemima. Anybody else got anything for today? But no, I know that. I mean, we did, last time we did a lot though, didn't we? You know what I mean? And we've done a big lot today in terms of the budget. And I mean, that some of the announcements that you'll be making at the budget meeting in a few weeks' time, well, it's not that far, it's not a few weeks now, is it? When is it?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, that's all. And so you'll be doing lots of announcing as part of that, I hope, because there's a lot in that budget to be celebrating and to make sure everybody knows about. So that's all good.
Finance row tell you about an exciting project called Armada Way.
Oh, yes.
It's on time and it's on programme.
Well, that's brilliant. That is really good news, Mark. Thank you for that, and thank you for making that so short and sweet.
And they poured some concrete the weekend.
And they poured some concrete in the weekend, and it was very successful. Yes, indeed. Okay, I mean, that is great news to hear that project is going well, because we often hear when things aren't going well, don't we? So it's good to know when they are.
But joking aside, we'll be making a statement about the progress on Armada Way, because it is going really well. We're ordering lots of materials and lots of plants and trees and so on and so forth. So, excellent progress being made around the fountain. The new fountain's being brought to life, and like I say, lots of stuff's been ordered. So, and we're on programme, as I've said, and we're on budget, which are incredibly important. So, yes, good news.
Okay, well, if I could set you a challenge, which would be if we could have even more good news coming out of Armada Way more frequently, even to the point of repetition, because you do get a lot of repetition when people don't like stuff. But when there's good stuff about it, you don't hear it so often. So there'd be me saying, even if you think you've said it twice, say it a third time. You never know, it might just stick. I just wanted to move us on to the last item on the agenda today, the LGA update. Jemima and I went to the Local Government Association Labour Conference this weekend. Councillor Cresswell was there too, and it was very successful. The staff in the LGA Labour office worked really hard to pull the conference together. We had the Deputy Prime Minister came, the Local Government Minister came, the Chair of the House of Commons Select Committee into Local Government was there. The panels were great, lots of prominent local government speakers. Wes Streeton was there, the Minister for Health, and we had a good session with him as well. Lots to feedback in due course. Just wanted to say that the LGA has been tracking what's been going on with local government reform, local government reorganisation and devolution, because there's a lot of moving parts going on at the moment. The chair of the LGA, Councillor Louise Gittins, has welcomed the fast-track devolution proposals, but also the government's decision to postpone some local elections. Now, I know some political parties have been trying to make mischief out of this, but the reason for the postponement of a handful of local authority elections was because they were about to be reorganised. So the point was, why have elections this year and then have to tear up the results of those elections effectively and have new elections again in new authorities on new boundaries? So actually, this was to save taxpayers' money, not to incur it. And the other thing to say is that the LGA are offering councils such as ours support on devolution and LGR issues, including, and this will be exciting for me, a new devolution hub. I love a hub. Love a hub. Can't have enough hubs. But there's for some local authorities around the country, there'll be no experience of local government reorganisation at all left in the organisation, no organisational memory or any of that. So having somewhere for those authorities to go, even an authority like ours, which has got a lot of big and clever people in it, there aren't many in this authority that were there in '97 when we became a unitary authority, for example. And so this kind of support is really really good. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there for now. Speaking of West Street, in which we were, the launch of the government's 10-year NHS plan, and lots of people seeking assurance from the NHS, from the Department of Health in particular, that local authorities' role in health and in prevention and in tackling health inequalities was recognised, and making sure that our input into that 10-year plan was heard loud and clear. There was a lot of discussion in the session with Wes that I attended around things like let's call it the patchy performance of integrated care boards around the country. It's fair to say that there are some examples of where it's working really well, and there's some examples of where it's not working very well at all. There are some ICBs that are far too big to be functional. There are some that are too small to be viable. There are some, all of them in fact, with a balance in favour of health services as opposed to our services, needs to be redressed. And finally, discussions around ageing well, livability, well-being and all of that, again, showing the role that local authorities play in all of those agendas, and obviously the public health agenda as well. So there's a report called Building Fairer Towns, Cities and Regions, which the LGA have produced. It's sort of marmoty, if I could put it like that. And if you haven't had a look at it, I'd give it a look at, even if you're not like in Mary's sphere. Actually, you know, there's insights there that might be useful to all of your portfolios. So, you know, I would give it a go. Okay, I think that'll do for today. Thanks ever so much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the council meeting, right?
Yes. In 2 weeks' time.
All right, 2 weeks' time. Thanks, everyone.